Car's right over here.
Hey, give me your money.
Hey, stop! Guys, get to safety.
What's going on?
Oh. Keep going, guys.
Okay, I'm going.
Are you guys in the car?
Yeah, we're in the car. Come on.
Thank you, you guys. Let's make a little circle facing each other. Chit. Kinye. Hello, welcome to our Safer Together training. Today we'll be working on our community safety program called Safer Together. When we say words like safe, safer, or safety, we recognize that no place or situation is completely without danger. A staircase, wet floor, earthquake, or tornado are all examples of ways we could get hurt. In this program, safer means moving towards a reasonably less dangerous situation or area. It is not a guarantee of no possible harm.
Yeah, so as we continue to get through this, we're going to talk about different points as we kind of get through this kind of bullet list of kind of situations and what self-protection and self-defense means. The term self-defense is the one that most people are going to be a little more familiar with in terms of like definition. So the self-defense flashpoint is kind of that exact time when like you or someone you're with or you care about are in immediate danger. Right? This could be physical harm, but it could also be like really intense emotional harm. Any of those parts where you would see like a movie play out or something like that, right? Something that those very intense moments. Generally, keeping yourself safe comes from a whole lot of situations before that, but this is that kind of like really important part. And so when we remember this, right, it's really important to remember that that self-defense flashpoint is not your main piece. It is one of the pieces, and it's very important, but hopefully you don't have to use it super regularly. You should hopefully be able to get through using the main parts of the self-protection, the first step and the second step, before you ever have to get into that third step. It's also really important to remember that regardless of the situation, aside from assaulting somebody yourself, no one's entitled to assault you in any capacity. It's just hard stop. Nobody is entitled to your space or your time other than what you choose to grant them, other than when you're doing something towards someone else.
The term self-protection we are using to mean all of that preparation and practice before and the control and healing after, as well as the self-defense flashpoint. Self-protection is what makes self-defense effective and more likely to succeed. This is why we like to call what we do safety training or self-protection as opposed to self-defense.
The next thing we're going to talk about is the term community. So we all know the ideas of communities. We've been parts of them our whole lives, whether it's been being in school or having those around you, right? We have different kind of ideas of that. And when we talk about community, particularly in the context of self-protection, it's surrounding yourself with people that you would want to be around, right? So creating those safe environments where you can grow and support each other is really important. When we think about that and like who specifically we are as a community, right? You think of your friends, you think of your family, you think of potentially like your work. They're all communities you're parts of, but that doesn't necessarily always mean that they're the environment you want to be in. So you want to try and cultivate those experiences. Even if it's people you really enjoy being around, those communities aren't always necessarily positive. So you want to think, how can I make those communities more positive for everyone else around me? So I think particularly with our community at ENSA Center, we do a lot of what's called self-cultivation, or trying to be a better person through our practice of martial arts. And as a means of that, we always find how can we create environments where people can grow physically and mentally to better reflect what you're looking for.
I really like that. One of the things Matthew brought up I think is very important is in an unhealthy community, our training should help you to survive. In a community where some parts are healthy, some parts are a little questionable, how do we support the parts that make us safer, healthier, and able to change? And then when we don't have a strong community, how do we reach out and create one that helps us to be safe? I think that's really helpful. Thank you. We'll be going through the class in the same order as we think a conflict may arise or resolve. The first phase is to know yourself. In our program, we emphasize training to help you understand your responses to threatening situations. It's understanding things like the sympathetic nervous system, commonly called the fight or flight response, the parasympathetic nervous system, called the relaxation response, and how to join them to create peak performance, commonly called the flow state or being in the zone. Understanding these things will greatly improve your ability to respond the way you have trained or would want to. When we are under stress and under pressure, oftentimes we're not able to do our training because we haven't trained in that same type of situation. So hopefully your practice today will help you to be present and able to respond the way you would like to. There are 5 effects of the sympathetic we have talked about in PAC's program so far. They are fight, flight, freeze, faint, and friend or fawn. Some positive qualities associated with these responses are increased speed, increased strength, and pain tolerance. Some negative qualities include a lack of judgment, a lack of peripheral vision, and a lack of small motor skills. This can be really difficult when you're trying to do a self-defense move that you've practiced and you lose your small motor skills. It just doesn't work the same way. Some positive qualities of the parasympathetic are increased reasoning, increased awareness, and the activation of that flow state. This peak performance state brings the positive qualities of both systems together while decreasing the negative effects. One situation you may not think of is when you're in a doctor's office or having a specific procedure, how can activating this peak state or this parasympathetic help you?
Hello, my example is using my breathing exercises in a doctor's office. When I was having cataract surgery, it was very important to stay relaxed and still. And while there was no real pain involved, you do feel pressure on your eye. So I used my breathing exercises that we use in class every day to help me stay relaxed. And afterwards, the doctor said the surgery was so successful because he rarely had a patient who was able to stay so still and relaxed during the surgery. So there's many times that it comes up that these exercises can be helpful to you in life in a way that you don't think of as self-protection, but it is.
Nice. So one thing that she mentioned there that I think is really important is this idea that you can't just do the exercise at the time when you need it. Particularly activating the parasympathetic needs to be done like on a daily basis. But luckily it doesn't take very long. So what I'd like to do is to go through some of our basic breathing exercises that help to activate the parasympathetic. They also help you to be aware of the room around you, the people around you, and they're the basic motions that we'll be using for our self-defense. So if I could have everybody join us, make a circle. Half circle. Okay. Feet shoulder width apart, head suspended from above as if by a string. Relax your shoulders. And this one's really important to breathe from your center, just below your belly button. Sometimes they call that belly breathing. First one is called rise and fall. Breathing in, let your hands float up. Breathing out, reach out towards the horizon. Breathing out a little longer than you breathe in. Breathing in, draw back towards the heart. Breathing out, let the hands float down. And it's good to do 3 to 5 of these. The second one is pushing forward. Breathing in, draw the hands up. Breathing out, push forward. Not a very creative name. Breathing in, draw back towards the heart. Breathing out, settle and sink. Number 3 is called pushing sideways. Breathing in, come up from your center to your heart. Breathing out, push out to the sides. Our high five exercise. Breathing in, draw back towards the heart. Breathing out, let the hands float down. Scanning for any points of tension, let them relax and release. Number 4, pushing upward. Breathing in, draw up from the ground. Breathing out, push up towards the sky. Breathing in, draw back towards the heart. Breathing out, slowly float down. Nice. So this is a complete set of exercises by itself. I'd like to introduce also kind of a side-side circular motion exercise, and this will help us with some of our self-defense techniques as well as getting us into our body and into the place where we are. One hand comes around the front, one hand moves around the back, circling from side to side. One of the key points of this one is whole body motion. And at this first stage, this kind of gets you into your space where you feel comfortable. Nice. Now, even though we aren't to the third stage where we're dealing with physical conflict, I'd like to show how these connect a little bit to dealing with other people in your environment. So we call this crowd practice. And so this is not someone attacking you, but how do you get through a group of people in a way that you feel safe and comfortable? One of the tricks is that you take the place of where the person is as opposed to pushing them out. So if Matthew and I were working together here, if you guys could stay here also, I might start with that kind of front-back motion that we did, and as I'm walking I can reach forward and then I pull back as I move around him. If I was working with Susan and Matthew, from here, as I'm going through, I could have that feel I know where they are this way, and then I can pull in and move through, being more aware of my situation and my surroundings. If I'm working with Rich and Bill here, my side might be to go to one side, go to the other side in order to move around. So to kind of use this as an experiment or a puzzle, what I'd like to do is have, let's say we were at a concert and the band is playing over there. If you guys could be right here, watching the band over this way, and kind of close together, difficult to come through. If I come in here and I start to push on them, aside from not being very nice, it's not really very healthy or helpful. So in this position, I can reach out, gently turn from side to side, and take the place where one person was, but still kind of support them. Then I can take another one and go, right here, and I can turn my body one way, and then bring that person back to here. If you're taller, please don't stand in front of other people. If I could have Matthew do the same thing, how would you move through this difficult group of people?
Other than going around, we're going to go through here. We're going to start by getting in that spot and try and slowly take that space and find where the gaps naturally are and try and move in between those.
Matthew made that look really easy. That is not that easy. So this is a great thing to practice in different places. Susan, do you want to get through the crowd?
Sure.
Hey, Dad.
Hey. Yeah, pretty cool, huh?
Yeah.
I can draw Jason into me like this.
Excuse me.
Then as I turn, I can come back this way. Jason goes back where he was, and I can turn like me.
There we go. Rich, do you want to move through us? There we go. Thank you, guys. So this kind of practice, I think, is really helpful for later practice. It helps you stay calm when you're interacting with other people. You're aware of their boundaries, you're aware of yourself and kind of what's going on with you. So practicing regularly your breathing exercises, as well as that centering, grounding, and moving around. Okay.
So that leads us into our next phase, that second phase. So could you talk a little bit about the second phase?
Yeah. So in second phase, this is the initial contact. So when we encourage you to practice on small threats and stressors to prepare for larger threats. Pay attention to your instincts and emotions. Your emotions and your instincts are senses. So like your other senses, you want them to inform you and not control you. Pay attention to the instincts and emotions of the people around you as well. That's where I like that crowd practice, is if you see someone starting to get upset, you kind of move a different way. Pay attention to their emotions and the people around you as well. These can give you valuable information much earlier than you might otherwise be aware of it. That way we are safer together. In the second phase, this initial contact, we work on situational awareness, knowing the threats. What are the indicators that a situation or a person's a threat? The sooner you recognize a threat, the better you can prepare for or avoid it. Many martial arts look fake or ineffective because the demonstration is prearranged and preserves the attacker, which in a self-defense situation you might not want to do. So you can repeat the exercise. You want to be able to do it over and over again. If you get rid of your partners, it doesn't work so well that way. One thing people often don't realize is that the preparation before and the control after a flashpoint, what most people define as a self-defense situation, is what makes self-defense more effective. This is why we like to call what we do safety training or self-protection as opposed to self-defense. A real attack situation will seem different every time, and you will likely have to adjust your response. It will not look like your training, but your training will help you be successful and navigate the situation. One time when my dad was dealing with a particularly potentially dangerous situation, he had to look for those indicators. If you could tell us a little bit about how you were able to tell when someone went from being someone you saw to someone who was a dangerous person.
Yeah, I was in an interview situation, and I had heard that from the person out at the front desk that this gentleman seemed a little agitated. And so, first of all, I took a deep breath and kind of looked around my office thinking, I want to interview this guy because I have to interview this guy. So how best can I deal with this? And so I invited him in and explained that I understood that he seemed to be a little bit upset about what we were going to talk about, which he was. And I could tell by looking at him that he was kind of tense and kind of staring at me, giving me the eye. And so what I decided to do was to set my chair not behind my desk to where the back wall was, there was no way for me to get out, to set the chairs right in front so we could face each other, and either one of us, if we wanted to get out the door really quickly, we could do that. So I did that, and then as I started looking at him, he started to get more agitated, and he started to breathe a little bit harder, and tried to explain to me how he wasn't really getting mad, but I could tell he was getting mad, and he was getting more agitated, and he started getting up and looking over me and invading my space. And I said, it seems to me like we're getting a little excited here, and I think we need to cool it down a little bit. And he continued to move into my space. At that point, I just took my hand and I put it up to the woman at the front desk, because I had explained to her, if I put my hand up, I want you to call 911. And then I explained to the man that it seemed like our conversation had deteriorated a bit, and that maybe we could set up another time to talk, because we do need to talk. And he said, well, I'm going to get your family. And at this point, I said, well, the police have already been called, so I think we need to stop this right now. And I turned and I left. I left him right there. And that's what happened. The police came, and there was no, anyway, it turned out okay. So that was a situation. So I breathed, I tried to relax, I tried to help him get relaxed, and we had our conversation.
When you went through that, what were like 3 things that kind of tipped you off that things were going sideways?
The expression on his face, the tenseness of his body, and moving into my space.
Yeah.
defining my space, and even after I defined my space with the chairs, he got up, he moved towards me, and I could tell that with his breathing, and I could just tell that he was getting more and more anxious.
Yeah, I like that you were able to identify and call the police before he threatened you. That really bore out that you were correct about seeing what was going on.
Well, he had threatened me in a way, but I anticipated it, and that's what we did. So thanks.
Okay.
Yeah, I was gonna say it's really nice to hear stories where people go through all of those as well. Like you can clearly see, like you established that first phase pretty particular. He's like, you know, he had a sign ready in case things went bad. He kind of already knew a little bit about the person and kind of what things to expect. He had his chair in that correct orientation, so he knew ways to get out before it ever occurred to that. Then he used that second phase where he had that initial contact, like how he was judging the person, and that situational awareness of how things started to escalate and change and how the boundaries weren't respected. Also, if you guys want to hear any more about that, our previous PAX one that we did for the women's self-defense, those VODs are available on our YouTube. If you watch those, they'll go a little bit more in depth about what we're talking about there, and it might be a useful tool as well.
Really cool.
Yeah.
The next thing I'd like to do is show a little bit how training doesn't look like an actual conflict, but it can really help you to be successful in an actual conflict. So if I could have Matthew and Rich.
Yes, sir.
So one of the exercises that we do, good to see you guys, is just a basic turning exercise. How do we connect one circle to another circle? And when people watch this, they often, a comment I get all the time is, that would never happen that way. And that's exactly right. But it teaches us about the circles and the movement. So this is what a training exercise, which was larger, more extreme, might look in our practice. So if we have same side wrist grab, turning the body, rotating, dropping down, guiding the person forward. If in an actual situation, that seems very unlikely, but relatively slowly, if Rich has grabbed me and he's punched, I want that same circle, much, much smaller. I change the direction around, just like we did before. We have the knee strike, we have the turn, and we have the person down on the ground. From this position, we might move over and control. Again, it's probably not going to go that smoothly either, but it's the same circles. As Matthew mentioned in our previous offerings, we talked a little bit about being relentless. So we want to be yielding and relentless. If Matthew and I are working together and he's choking me here, I might move up, a classic defense this way, rotate over and throw. It's probably not going to work that way. If Rich and I are working together and he's here, I can come up and I may have to do like 3 different times. I may have to push him away in the center, rotate his body, strike, pull in order to get away. Thank you very much, guys. Good work. If you know you'll be out with someone else you trust, it's really also important to practice this stage with them. So get used to sharing your perceptions quickly and clearly so that you can take advantage of each other's strength. Too often we suppress our uneasiness till it bursts out. And so we want to make sure if you have someone that's with you, don't just tell them to calm down. Listen to what they're saying. You don't want anxiety or frustration to control what you're doing, but you do want to listen to it. It lets you know something's going on, something's wrong. It can be too late when it bursts out to make easy adjustments. Take advantage of your combined perceptions and resources. We are safer together. Negative indicators are also called red flags. One red flag is enough to make you pay more attention, like in my dad's story. But several should let you know to prepare, that you really need to make sure everything is okay. Some indicators that that a person might be a threat, we have several. Matthew, could you go over some of the indicators?
So, there are a lot of different kinds of indicators. I'd say the first one that you kind of want to know is the lack of physical or like ignoring physical barriers or boundaries, right? A classic example that Bill had just talked about in his story was that person who he was interviewing was ignoring Bill's comments. He was saying like, I think it's starting to escalate a little bit. We need to come here. I'm not very comfortable with this. The person got up and tried to make themselves even bigger towards him. That's a pretty clear indicator that they weren't really respecting Bill's boundaries. He made very clear boundaries, and when that's there, that's that kind of first part, and that's the one where you really kind of notice maybe you should be paying a little extra attention to somebody. This doesn't necessarily mean it's a bad thing. Some people just have different perceptions of physical boundaries than others. Particularly different cultures can have different things, right? Whether it's, you're dealing with somebody who you're really familiar with or somebody that you don't really know as well. Like when you're walking up to your significant other, you're probably not going to be this far apart to kind of have that boundary. You're probably going to be a little more familiar with each other and come in close, or your own family, for example. These are just kind of ways that you can see that. The second one is erratic behavior. So we all kind of understand the idea of erratic behavior, but an example of that would be like you're walking downtown Seattle and somebody's just casually walking and they just start shouting randomly at what is perceivably nothing for you. That would be erratic behavior. That would be something that I would consider to be a red flag. Doesn't necessarily mean they have any real hostile intent towards me, but that is something where I'm like, hey, that's not something I'm expecting to see, not something I'm particularly comfortable with. I'm going to be particularly aware of that person or situation. The third one would be like unhealthy fixation or attention. Unfortunately, I'm sure many people have experienced this, but when you're walking home or you're at a bar or at a situation or even in a public setting, when they're sitting there, they're looking at you and they're hyper fixated on you, or they're constantly making comments after you've made it very clear that you're not interested in those comments, right? That's showing they're ignoring your boundaries, but it also has another layer on top of that. It's now that constant fixation where you feel like they're just not going to leave you alone, right? Unfortunately, this is one that tends to happen more towards women. I'm sure most women have at least one experience with this. It's a very important thing to listen to people who've had these experiences as well. Your experiences might not be the same as other people's, so it's really important to have a diverse community that you can learn from, because it helps you be safer and it helps them be safer and it helps you to not perpetuate them, especially if you did something that may come across as a red flag and you never meant it to, right? One of the best ways to grow is to look at those things, and if somebody's telling you with good communication that they didn't like that, don't keep doing it, right? Like, be like, oh, maybe that doesn't present in the way that you thought it would. Just as we mentioned in the previous PAX videos, communication is kindness. Clarity is kindness, right? Not communicating things to other people doesn't help anybody around you, right? Particularly, like, I know when you make a joke with a friend, right? Like, if you really know that friend pretty well, you can make most jokes that are comfortable with each other because you kind of know where those boundaries lie. But if they do make jokes that are a little bit like uncouth or like outside your realm of comfortability, let them know, right? Like, people don't want to be awful towards you, right? And so if you keep making jokes and you keep pushing that envelope, even if it makes you uncomfortable, it's going to go beyond where you're comfortable. And then we get to our fourth one out of 5, which is like intimidating or belittling. We all understand this one, but like a classic example of that would be like if you're at a grocery store or whatever, and somebody not just yelling at you, but they're like just kind of a bigger person, right? Like if you're a particularly small person, you see a really big person who has a very big personality, that can be intimidating, right? Especially if they like cut in front of you in line. Cutting in front of you in line, really not a big deal, right? Is it not nice? For sure, but it's not a life-threatening situation. But some people are just demanding. They just really want that space. And that can be a way of intimidating as well, right? It's not necessarily that in itself is a slight on your life. It's not. But it is a red flag. That is something to be aware of. And then our last one is isolation tactics. This one I would say is one of those red flags that immediately is worth a lot of points, right? If you think of them like, oh, I'm not necessarily going to be that scared at like 1 point, one red flag. This one is one I think is worth quite a bit. So isolation tactics are when they try to get you away from a group or in a situation. We've talked about it in the previous packs as well, that like attackers generally want secrets. They want people who are going to keep those secrets. Best way to be a criminal is to never get caught. So if you make it so they know they're going to get caught, they're less likely to do it. So they're going to try and get you isolated, try and remove you from that community, from that support where you can feel strong and secure, because they might not want to do the best of intentions. That is one of those really, really big red flags, particularly if they're trying to bring you to a different area. That's one of those where you really want to immediately evaluate your situation heavily, because that is a high level of danger. And so you want to be really aware of that. And that's kind of like the 5 main big indicators to really look for. One example of this that we have is if Rich would come over here and tell his story about kind of how those indicators came out in a defense situation.
Okay, great. We were in Ireland, my wife and I, in Kilkenny about 10 years ago, and we were enjoying a nice beer in a pub on the high street of Kilkenny. Highly recommend it, by the way. And Guinness does taste better if you ever want to go to Ireland. And my wife and I were enjoying a quiet beer, and then 2 guys came in. And obviously we're in a foreign country, so we're being polite and nice and friendly to these folks. And they were having a drink. And then immediately, or after a little while of being friendly, it became clear that they were absolutely hammered. Like, they were drunk, their behavior was somewhat erratic. They started to get a bit over familiar. My wife was next to them, so I went and stood in between and, continued to be friendly and polite, but obviously my nervous system was then activated. And anyway, so this went on for a while, and then I then started, how do I get us out of this situation? And for context, I've done martial arts for 30 years, and so I'm confident in my ability, but my priority was protection and obviously protecting my wife. And so we were trying to leave, and then these guys insisted that we go to another pub, a traditional Irish pub. And so we were like, okay. And so we went to this, 20 yards up the street to this other pub, and we went in. And I looked at my wife and I said to these guys, why don't you guys go sit at the back of the pub and we'll bring the drinks over to you. And so my wife and I went up to the bar. I ordered the drinks, and I got the bar lady to deliver the drinks. Meanwhile, my wife and I exited the pub and made a beeline up the road out of there. And what was going through my head was self-protection rather than self-defense, right? I'm relatively confident in my abilities, but I don't want to get into a situation. And so the question was, how did I get my wife to safety? And so that's what was going through my head throughout the whole thing. And so then, I just looked at her and she knew what was going through my head. And then we were able to devise this plan, get the drinks to them, get us out of the situation, and get to safety. So,
outstanding work under pressure. Thank you.
Yeah. One thing I want to talk about is, we talked about that because we're right about to move on to that third phase, that self-defense phase, just like Rich was talking about with his significant other, which was making sure they were safe as the first piece, right? That is your first and foremost piece if you are trying to be a bystander to keep somebody safe, is you don't want to escalate the situations further. If we can avoid this third phase, you want to avoid this third phase as much as possible. This is the situation where people do get hurt. A lot of times when people are like protecting their partners or friends, particularly in things like bars or something, right? Comments get made about somebody and that makes someone feel uncomfortable. So they get bigger, they start to posture back at the person. This is kind of an escalation tactic. And then the other person may escalate further, and this can lead into things like fights and stuff like that. But if you really want to keep somebody safe, bringing somebody into a fight that might not have been a fight before is one of the last things you want to do to keep them safe, right? Particularly as, myself or Jason or Rich or any of us who've practiced martial arts for a long time, we feel pretty confident in our abilities to be okay in a fight. That being said, I don't want to bring my significant other into that situation. That's not going to be safe for anybody, right? My first and foremost priority, just like Rich was saying, would be to get her into a situation where she's not going to be in immediate danger anymore. And a lot of what we see in like movies or media or things like that is really like, you know, that third stage. We hammer that home. That's a really important part. You know, I stood up for my significant other when somebody was making a comment about her body, and that's fine. You can use your words to do that, but you don't have to immediately, you know, try to be John Wick and off somebody because they said something off, you know, uncouth. That's not really particularly helpful, particularly because fights are dangerous. Things get out of control in a fight. So we try to avoid that as much as possible. But if you can't avoid it, we go into our third phase.
Nice.
Yeah.
In the third phase is we're actually interacting with the other person physically. So practice managing your responses to be able to apply your training under stress. Under stress, our motions get smaller and our timing changes. With practice, these are an advantage. Without practice, it can feel like you are out of control. The more people you coordinate with in your self-protection practice, the quicker you are able to coordinate with new people, even someone you don't know well. Working through various scenarios, when you've workshopped several scenarios, you can mix and match your tools in the moment and being safer together. So I really recommend, if you have a chance, to find some place like Enso Center, find a community where you can kind of figure out these different situations and workshop them as you go, remembering they'll never be the same. So what I'd like to do here is we're going to look through several different scenarios and kind of go through a practiced, arranged demonstration, and then how might that look in a more raw situation when things don't go right. So the first one I'd like to do is isolated a street with your partner. So Matthew has prepared some for this. If we could look at kind of a planned arrangement, and then being able to take that into a situation where things don't go right.
Yeah. So if we have Jason and I over here, and then we have Rich come over, so that way we have our interactive part here. If we're going to do this kind of more planned section, you know, let's say Rich comes up and he pushes me first. So if he pushes me, my first instinct is not going to be to move across and just hit him as much as possible. That's not going to keep my friend safe. So the first thing he does push, I might turn to the side and say, oh, sorry, you know, try to establish that clear boundary, but I've also kept this space clear. Our boundary is maintained just by doing that side to side that we've done lots of times throughout our other PAX situations. That's just a nice, very simple way to give yourself time and space to evaluate that situation. However, if this is more of a kind of raw situation, he may do something different. He may attack in a different way, he may move, it doesn't really matter. But what I want to do is I want to always keep control, and notice how I keep that space away from my friend, right? I'm taking up the space that Rich wants to take, and that gives me, again, space. If you want to do it a little more escalating, you can do more strikes, you can take things down, but this is going to be a situation that's a little more simple. I'm just turning to the side, I use my leg just to push him away, I'm not hitting him to establish pain, I'm not trying to look for pain compliance, I'm trying to create space so we have time to leave. That's going to be our first and foremost. So if he does it one more time, and we do this again with that same kind of circle, I want to establish this. I can do these strikes, and again, I'm creating that space, right? Even when it's striking, I'm not trying to hurt him. I'm trying to create space, de-incentivize that, so he has time to think. The more time they are thinking, the less time they are trying to hurt my partner or friend. So that'd be that first one.
One of the things I really like about this that Matthew mentioned is, and we'll keep Rich here for a minute, is, you know, we've traveled a lot together, we've been in a lot of different situations, and just getting, you know, talking to the person about how to stay on the other side, how to be the most advantageous in the situation. So let's go ahead and do a little bit of what Matthew was doing before. We'll make it even more of an exercise where if Matthew is dealing with the person, I'll circle around to try to keep him between the two of us. And then if I see an opportunity, I might step in to do something. But in this particular exercise, he's trying to make sure that Rich can't get to me. And I'm trying to make sure that Rich can't get to me in that situation. It may switch in an actual situation. We may trade jobs, but for right now, let's do that just a little bit. So as Rich is coming towards Matthew, I am trying to keep him in that other side. And I might be calling for help. I might be going, oh, I'm recording. And this starts to allow me to be in a safer position to think and know what I should do next. Thank you, you guys. Good work. So, same idea. Let's say this time Matthew is a difficult person, which Matthew can be a difficult person. And so, as he's here, Rich and I are walking along, and Matthew has come through, and I'm trying to keep the two away from each other. And so, in this situation, as that's happening, and things are going wrong and I've tripped and it hasn't worked well, I might move into a position where I have to take that person down. Even at this point, I'll check, make sure everything is okay. Did you call the police? Can you get to safety? And then I'll get to safety as well. Rich, what's one way that you might deal with things when it goes a little bit wrong? So if you were protecting Matthew as I'm attacking you, and I'm trying to get to Matthew,
I'm always thinking about how am I in between the two of you, and how am I a physical barrier to protect the person that I'm with.
and you've established that I am an actual threat.
Yes.
And so if you were using strikes or throws, boom, boom, Matthew's called the police. And I'm like, I just was asking for directions.
And then I might try and restrain and then wait.
Excellent. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, let's look at a little bit different situation. How would we deal with things if we have a friend at a bar? So if I could steal a couple chairs. And this time, Rich and I have gone out for a drink somewhere. And I'll have this one be right here.
My Guinness.
Yeah, there we go. I like it. And so kind of an exercise might be just a gentle flowing type of motion. So as Matthew has come over and he's starting to talk to one of us, then from this position I might step, turn, I do my side to side circle, bring him into the chair, and then say, oh, you know, now I'm not trapped in the chair the same way. It's between the two of us, so we have an advantage in dealing with him as well. And we go, oh, what's going on? How are you?
Yeah, less good.
Yeah, okay. Why don't you come over here and you can sit over here. So if the situation was escalating a little bit, and we've seen a lot of those different indicators, let's say he's yelling, he's erratic, he's maybe altered, then we don't want to stay in the situation. So as he's coming through to get to me, or Rich, as I come over here, I might drop him down this way, and I say to the bartender or to Rich, you know, please call 911, working with someone else as we're right here, making sure that he is in a position. You calming down? Everything okay?
No.
Yeah, okay. We'll keep the person here for a second as we're going through. And third, we realize the situation has gone really bad. In this way, we see the danger, the person's come here. As that's happening, I say, you know, yeah. Rich, let's leave. So as he's going to leave, I might leave this situation right here, and we get out of the situation. Questions or thoughts on this kind of thing? We have a great group of people here to crowdsource from.
One thing I think is really interesting, when you have the object, instead of being yourself in the way you did a good job of managing that there's always something in between me and the other person you were trying to protect. I thought that was just a cool little anecdote, is that there's always something in between, whether it's you or it's an object or it's, you know, some other person. There's something in the way that keeps them from getting to the person you're trying to protect. It's just a neat little detail.
Very, very cool.
Well, the other thing I was going to say is clarity. Your movements were clear. Your communication was clear as well. I knew exactly what was going on and what you wanted me to do, like to exit the ring, for example.
Yeah.
I think that's something that I sometimes forget, and I really try to do, is the communication with your partner when something else is going on is really important. Be clear into dealing with both people. That also helps people understand what's going on around at the location where you are. Let's go ahead and look at if you had a child at a sporting event. So someplace where you might be afraid someone might try to take them or something. Okay. What sport should we work with today?
Well, Super Bowl is in a couple days. Let's go football.
I don't know that it really matters.
Yeah, I don't think so either. But it'll be a very crowded event. So.
Okay. So in this kind of situation, practicing holding hands, being close to someone, I think is really important. We don't have any too small of ones here today. So why don't we start with, I'll be a kid.
At heart.
At heart. Okay, could we have a couple more crowd members? Okay, so in this situation, maybe we have seen that there is a fixation. Susan is a member of the crowd, and Bill and Rich have kind of fixated on a kid that's over here, and you're starting to feel uncomfortable. So what are some indicators you might look for that there's a danger they might be trying to take a kid?
One indicator would be if I physically am trading places with you. If their tracking also follows you, that's going to be one of those. That's not just fixation on the spot, it's fixation on you personally. That would be one where I'm like, okay, I don't feel particularly comfortable. So one thing I might do is I might take your spot, but I'll also be really close, right? That close is really important, and where you have that physical contact, particularly in really crowded spaces, it's going to be that first key indicator of I've made it very clear that I was uncomfortable, so I'm not in the way physically, and making direct eye contact with them to let them know that I'm very clearly uncomfortable with this space. That'd be my first step.
I like it. My father, Bill, also worked with Project Child Find as well as Child Protective Services, and so he's dealt with situations. Could you tell us maybe just a little bit about dangers of child abduction? Short version.
Make sure you hold it nice.
All my versions are very long. No, I think what was just said is very clear. People get fixated on a child and will try to move towards the child and try to befriend the child, and will seem like they're stuck to the child. They don't allow them to have any boundaries of their own. And I suppose when we're trying to protect them, we try to help them create a bigger boundary for themselves.
And that would be a way that you could tell if they were fixated, similar to what Matthew said. If you created a boundary and they continually cross it, then you know something is off.
Exactly, yeah. Exactly. And I think the people around you can also be a part of a
good resource.
Yeah, it's a good resource and can get in between the child and the person that wants, so that that's made very clear that people are very uncomfortable, not just the kid or somebody else.
Thank you. Okay, so now that I know they know these things, I'm a little bit even less sure as a child walking over here. So Matthew, keep me safe.
Yeah, so are we trying to get away, or are we trying to get across? What would you like to do for the scenario?
I'm hanging out. I'd kind of like to go to the store afterwards.
Okay, yeah, so if we're going to start to go to the store, we're going to start to move across this way. It's a little bit crowded over here. We might say, oh, pardon me, we're actually going to walk right over this way where we can get to a little bit more of this open space. We don't want to go back into that big crowd, because that's where I think it's going to be a little too crowded for us. So we're just going to try and maintain our space and that boundary so we don't really get caught up too much. If we find that they're a little bit too close and we start to not really have that much space, I'm going to want to try and get in between and be like, oh, it's nice to see you.
What a nice child you have.
That's great. I appreciate the compliment, right?
He's got such beautiful hair.
Oh, yeah, he does.
Can I touch his hair?
No, thank you, actually, right now.
Oh, it is so beautiful.
Yeah, actually, he might be sick, so I don't want to spread it. Yeah. And so we want to use those kind of context clues where, thank you, by the way, Bill, that was a really good example of oh, it seems innocent enough, but it's you know. And so I just tried to maintain that boundary. Notice that I was the one kind of in contact all the time. And then I set up that situation where I was like, oh, he's sick, right? You don't want to touch him right now. I try to make it very clear that like, they're like, oh, I don't mind that they're sick. That should be a pretty apparent red flag, especially after the first time I'm like, don't do that. And then he tries it again. And then I make it very clear, like, you will get sick if you touch him. And somebody's like, I don't mind. People should mind getting sick. That should be a healthy response for most people. So do keep those kinds of things in mind too. That's always a really easy tool is they're like, oh, actually they have the chicken pox or something. People will be like, oh, I don't want that. If they don't, you should be immediately aware of that person. That person is clearly not thinking in a healthy state.
So I think these are some great things to work with. This idea of talking together. So talking with kids that say, if I tell you that you can't go with someone, you can't go with them. You know, prearranging a little bit for that and gently moving the person. Susan, do you want to help Matthew out of a sporting event?
Sure.
Okay. I'm a member of the crowd. So, and these two bad guys over here are trying to kind of work together to get to Matthew. And Susan may enlist the help of the crowd or may get around or maybe just looks at them and they decide it's a bad idea. I'm not sure how it's going to work.
That's their smartest choice.
Yeah.
I think it's time to leave now.
Okay, can we go this way?
Sure.
Oh, actually, what if we go, oh,
Nice
I
hat.
guess not that way.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you. Ooh.
I'm feeling a little uncomfortable with you being quite so close. Could you give us a little bit of space, please?
She asked you to be a little bit, give a little bit of space. How are you guys doing today?
Oh, we're great.
It's good. It's good.
We're great.
It's good. This is a neat game.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Are you related to this young man?
Which one? The one over here?
No, the guy over
Okay.
here.
The one over here?
Okay. No, I'm fine. Don't touch me.
Nice. Good work,
That's
you
really
guys.
good. Nice spacing.
Notice in this situation, I saw something that was going a little bit sideways, and I stepped in without being too confrontive, but at the same time tried to support what I thought was a healthy way of dealing with the situation.
I think letting other people in the crowd know if you're starting to feel uncomfortable, you don't have to accuse someone of something, just letting them know that you're uncomfortable lets other people know what's going on and makes the person that is making you uncomfortable less likely to infringe.
Definitely. Next week, our next session, we'll be going over a little bit of environmental indicators that might be of an advantage or might be more dangerous to look out for. Couple things as we're going through. Any other things you guys noticed in this that you would like to see for dealing with these three situations? Possible problems?
The only thing I would say as a possible problem is if you don't have the space to get out, but that kind of comes from that first phase, right? Where you know where you can get out, where you can think about it. Or in your second phase where you have that environmental awareness about what's around you. So, but that's going to be kind of our theme for next week. So I don't think anything needs to be said other than kind of get to our fourth phase, like what do we do once those are done?
I think that's a really good point. So we will be going over things like at a rally, like a political rally, someone being lawfully or brutally detained at a concert, and other difficult situations next class. And those are really, really tricky. There's a lot of things for us to be careful of there.
As a bystander, how do I know when to engage, or is that what you're going to cover next week?
We're going to talk a little bit about that next week, but I think the indicators are a big thing too. So for this class, that's a great point. The same things that would make you feel dangerous, if you see someone else experiencing those things, if you see that going on around you, then it's a time to kind of check. And we will be talking about that a little bit in the next one, is how do we do some little tests in order to see if things are as bad as they seem, or if your instincts are correct. Because like Matthew said, if you have a bad feeling about something, you don't want to punch somebody, but it should let you know that that's one of your indicators. And then you start to gather other flags to see if it has gone too far.
I think our theme from some of our previous PAX classes of clarity is kindness, kind of helps with the bystander idea. If you see something and you're wondering, then be clear. Ask, do you need help? Would you like some companionship? Whatever. If they say no, then you can still keep an eye on things, but you've at least let someone know that you're there, and you've let the other person know that there's more than one person that they're dealing with.
Nice. So one of the things that we haven't really gotten to so far is none of these situations completely resolved. And so our time afterwards is really, really important. So our final phase, phase 4, is this healing and connecting to your support community. And so again, we talked about how can we create, support, and then survive in different communities. We want to find a safe, healthy community that we can get to, or survive the difficulty we are in and try to find a way to create that in the future. This includes connecting to the person you may be helping, with those that can help and support them, getting to safety, check yourself for injuries, seek medical help if necessary, review and record. So after you've had a situation and maybe it's gone really bad, maybe it's just seems a little bit off, I really recommend go over it in your head, write it down immediately so that you have some idea in the moment what you were feeling. The process of doing that is part of that healing process too. So even if you don't plan to show it to anyone, even if you don't plan to ever look at it again, going through that review and record process can help to balance your system and create peak performance in the future. Engage in whatever wellness practice you've chosen to help you find relaxation once safe. Continue engage in wellness and self-protection practices. Be aware, be curious and ready. Breathing, moving, learning. We have several programs that kind of emphasize these things at Enso Center. If you are not in a local area, feel free to reach out to us and we can try to find a place that is near you. We will be having at the end of this video in getting help, finding helplines, phone numbers where you can help to find doctors, support from, look for support from your family and friends, possibly law enforcement. Check out the list of hotlines at the end of the video, and soon they'll be on our website as well. To conclude, we're safer together when we create healthy communities, when we support healthy communities and those in them, and we work together to survive and change unhealthy communities that are hurting us or others. One of our most important concepts is one person or group's safety does not have to take away from another person or group's safety. We are safer together.
Yeah, and then for next week, we're going to be talking about some of these different ideas of confidence versus arrogance and kind of what that means in a self-protection situation, a little bit about humility versus insecurity, and then we're going to talk about these concepts of courtesy, patience, and clarity, and kind of how that reflects in your personal growth and your ideas of self-protection, and then some of the other things we had talked about, like being at a specific rally is like one of those situations, or if somebody's getting unlawfully arrested, how do you deal with that as a bystander, and things like that. So in our next week, we will be streaming at the same time. Please remember to check out our YouTube page or all of our other social media pages. It should be scannable with the QR code at the end of this stream. Thank you guys for helping us with this, and for all of you watching, thank you for helping us in maintaining PAX as the community that we would like to help foster and grow.
Thank you.
Yes,
Thank you.
Thank you, you guys. Thank you, everyone out there.